I'm Graham Pike. I'm the recreational fishing representative on the Community Stakeholder Task Force of the Native Fish Strategy. And I've been on that for about 10 years, nearly since it started. So I was a co-founder of RecFish Australia, which is the peak national recreational fishing body. So I was really pleased about being asked onto the committee, because I had worked a little bit with Jim Barrett in establishing the Native Fish Strategy. So to be actually part of implementing it and getting it out there in the community was quite exciting and quite instructive for me too. Any learning experience is fulfilling, and that's the way it has been for the past 10 years for me as part of the Community Stakeholder Task Force, because you're constantly learning from the community, their experiences with fish, with the native fish environment, and you're feeding that back to the Native Fish Strategy team. So it's a mutual learning project, and that's another reason I got so much out of it. To give you an example of the sorts of things, on one of our many trips during Native Fish Awareness Week, I met a fairly hard-bitten farmer, and he had a property up in the Namoy, on the Namoy River. And over time, he and his family had blocked off culverts and dry stream beds to try to prevent floodwaters coming on his property during the natural flood cycle every few years. However, he learnt through the Native Fish Strategy that these culverts were doing quite a bit of damage to the spawning facilities for native fish. In other words, they'd cut the native fish off from their spawning areas during floods. So working with the State Department of Agriculture, Primary Industries, and with the Murray-Darling Basin Commission, as it was then, he took the culverts away. They built fish-friendly culverts, and then on the next few floods, they came onto the property, they noticed fish spawning, but that wasn't where it stopped. The floods receded, and he suddenly noticed, over a couple of years following the removal of these fish obstructions, that the weeds on his property in the flooding areas were disappearing, and native grasses and shrubs were taking over. And in his estimation, within about 7 years of him removing the obstructions to the fish and the water, the floods, he'd increased that area of his farm, the production level of that area of his farm, 9 times. In other words, he could have 9 times as many cattle grazing on that same area of land. So that was a payoff for him in terms of agricultural production, and a payoff for us in the Native Fish Strategy on behalf of the fish, you know, and it increased the production of fish, of course, because they were back to their old spawning areas in that particular area. It's a long, slow process. The process of reducing the numbers of our native fish in the Murray-Darling Basin to from natural levels at the time of white contact, European contact, to getting it down to the 10% population levels of fish that we've got now was very quick. It's going to take decades, 50, 60, maybe 70 years to get back to probably 60 or 70% of the levels or population levels of native fish that we had at the time of European settlement. But I'm hopeful that the political process, where people not only living in the basin but Australians who are concerned about our native fish and our native fish are unique, and they're found principally in the basin. I think when the political process takes over and people say, hey, what happened to the native fish strategy? Who did that to that strategy? We want it back. That was our strategy. That was something we were working on. We want our fish back. I think the political parties will then have to turn around and say, well, yeah, maybe we should have a policy to bring back a native fish recovery and habitat rehabilitation program. Whether it's called the Native Fish Strategy or whether it's called a Native Fish Recovery and Rehabilitation Program, don't know, and I don't really care, so long as governments on our behalf start investing again in the future of our native fish. Because if you look after the fish habitat, the fish will look after themselves, and fish are the indicators of a healthy environment, healthy waters, healthy streamside environments, healthy pastures, healthy riparian zones. If you've got healthy fish, you know your environment is doing pretty well. And that's what we've got to get back to. One of the other important lessons I've learnt from the native fish strategy is that it is so important to work with our youngsters, with our kids, to ensure that they understand just how important our native fish heritage is, just how important to the ecosystem our native fish are, and what they can do to foster native fish and their habitats. If you understand the fish, you will be able to, one, fish for them more successfully, but two, also care for them in their environment and rehabilitate damaged habitats. So understanding comes first, and you get understanding from making sure that the kids are well educated about things like our native fish and their habitats.